Meet Bill Gates, your average billionaire software mogul. You may have heard of him. As some of you already know, Microsoft, the corporation that puts the pennies in Bill's loafers, is based in Redmond, Washington. What you may not know is that the state of Washington has just announced its budget will fall short by $2.6 billion through 2011. Well, according to former Microsoft employee and SD contributor Jeff Reifman, also known as the guy who found the missing Wired writer, this monster deficit could be cut down significantly if Bill would just pay his taxes. Let us explain. In Washington, any corporation who engages in software licensing must pay 0.5% tax on gross revenue. Rewind to 12 years ago, when Microsoft opened a special licensing branch in Reno, Nevada, to avoid paying just such a tax. Despite producing and marketing most of the software that it licenses in Washington state, Microsoft records their licensing revenue through a satellite office in Nevada, the land corporate taxation forgot. By doing this, Mr. Reifman contends that Microsoft has deprived the state of Washington of $728.8 million approximately over the past 12 years.
Remember, you should learn about money because it doesn't come with instructions.
If one adjusts for interest accumulated over time and penalties, that figure balloons to $1.24 billion, or nearly half the state's projected budget deficit. Joining us now is Jeff Reifman.
Thank you, Amanda.
The tech writer and former Microsoft employee who's been determined to prove that the corporation demanding more resources from the state has been the same one with its hand caught in the cookie jar. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us here at Internet Justice. Let's get right to the nitty-gritty. Are Microsoft's actions truly illegal? Or are they just capitalizing on corporate loopholes in order to improve their bottom line?
Well, Amanda, Microsoft is clearly in the software licensing business in Washington, and therefore subject to this tax. Microsoft builds the software in Washington. 2/3 of the officers of Microsoft Nevada are Washington-based employees. Its licensing contracts are governed by Washington law. It defends its Nevada contracts in Washington courts. Microsoft Nevada is simply an alter ego or front for Microsoft's Washington operations. Its Nevada employees are simply the tools it's using to evade this tax.
Surely any state in the financial morass that Washington is in would be acutely aware of any and all taxes due to them. Do you really think they could have missed this?
The Department of Revenue seems to be taking a conservative approach to enforcement. It's ignoring Microsoft's control over its Nevada licensing operation and justifying this inaction using a pre-internet 1965 state Supreme Court ruling on real estate taxes. The court probably did not anticipate the capability of a Washington-based corporation to electronically transfer license codes in seconds over the internet and evade $1 billion in taxes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
What's the relationship like between Microsoft and the state government? How would you describe Microsoft's corporate citizenship?
I'm glad you asked. State officials are hesitant to pick a fight with Microsoft since it's one of our largest employers. Over the past 4 years, it's spent over $1 million lobbying state officials. For every dollar it spends lobbying, it dodges $260 in taxes. Washington state doesn't have an income tax, so the 0.5% royalty tax is one way Microsoft is required to pay its fair share for the infrastructure its 40,000 local employees rely on. Sadly, the company is building a reputation for shameless hypocrisy. Microsoft doesn't like it when users ignore their license agreements. Well, Washington taxpayers don't like it when Microsoft ignores our tax law. For tax purposes, Microsoft tells the state it's operating in Nevada, but for legal purposes, it's using our courts and Washington law. It's trying to have it both ways.
At the end of the day, shouldn't we be glad that the business is still in the United States and not in India?
Actually, Microsoft already has 1,500 employees in India. In fact, after it laid off 2,000 Washington employees this year, it again asked Congress to end restrictions on H-1B visas so it can replace more Washingtonians with foreign workers. Microsoft's going to keep moving jobs out of Washington. That's already happening. The question is whether they should be allowed to evade taxes on the operations that they conduct here. Our schools are overcrowded, our infrastructure is crumbling, the state is preparing to tear down a major elevated highway because officials fear it may collapse in the next earthquake. We're also preparing to replace the longest floating bridge in the world, which many Microsoft employees use to get to work every day. Contrary to what Bill Gates thinks, this is really not in the best interest of Microsoft shareholders for him to keep thumbing his nose at state taxpayers.
What do you think, SD viewers? Is Microsoft guilty of skipping out on the check? Or are they just making the most out of a welcoming corporate climate that's riddled with tax-based incentives? I'll swing the gavel. You be the judge. Here on Sometimes Daily's Internet Justice.
We like our justice served raw.
Sometimes Daily is on tour through April 2010. Got a great story or know of a super interesting person for me to interview in these cities? If you do, pitch me at Amanda@sometimesdaily.com.